Introduction and background. From the moment I met him, I was completely captivated. It wasn't just a fleeting crush or some shallow attraction. I genuinely thought he could be the one. We met 2 years ago, and right away, I felt like we had this effortless connection. Every conversation flowed, every joke landed, and being around him just felt right. At first, I thought we were going on dates. The way we hung out, the late-night conversations, the shared laughter over inside jokes. It all felt like something more. But then, one night, after a few drinks, he started talking about a girl he had a crush on. I remember sitting there, my heart dropping, realizing in that moment that whatever I thought we had was completely one-sided. So I did what I thought was the mature thing. I told myself to move on and just be his friend. And I tried. I really did. But the more time we spent together, the deeper I fell. He checked every single box. Same humor, same taste in music, same views on life. We could talk for hours, help each other through rough days, and when we weren't together, I missed him. Like, physically ached from not seeing him. People who met us assumed we had been best friends for years. My friends teased me at first, thinking it was just a little crush, but as time passed, the teasing turned into concerned glances and pitying smiles. My sister outright told me I should stop seeing him. But how could I? He was my best friend. Letting go of him felt impossible, like cutting off a part of myself. And the worst part? There were moments, these small, fleeting moments, that gave me just enough hope to keep holding on. The way he looked at me sometimes, across the table at a party or from across the room at a bar, his gaze lingering just a little too long, his smile just a little too soft. I wasn't imagining it, our mutual friends noticed it too. It was those looks that kept me stuck, making me wonder, what if? But hope can be a cruel thing. Because while I was drowning in my feelings, he was just living his life, oblivious to the mess of emotions he left in his wake. And I had no idea what to do about it. 2. Struggles with unrequited love. Loving him wasn't fun anymore. It was exhausting. For 2 years, I kept waiting for my feelings to fade, for the ache in my chest to lessen, for my heart to finally get the message my brain already knew. He didn't feel the same way. But every time I saw him, every time we laughed together or stayed up late talking about life, I fell all over again. It was a cycle I couldn't break, and it was slowly ruining me. I tried dating other people, really good people who actually liked me back, but no matter how hard I tried, my heart wouldn't budge. Every date, every new connection felt hollow because none of them were him. It wasn't fair, to them, to me, but I couldn't stop comparing. My friends saw it. At first, they joked about how obvious my crush was, but as time went on, their jokes turned into concern. The pity in their eyes when his name came up was unbearable. My sister outright told me to cut him out of my life. But how could I? He was my best friend. Losing him felt like a worse heartbreak than the one I was already living with. And then, there were those moments. Those goddamn moments that made it impossible to fully let go. The way he looked at me, long, lingering stares from across the room, a soft smile that felt different from how he looked at anyone else. I wasn't crazy. Our friends noticed it too. It gave me just enough hope to keep me stuck in this painful limbo, making me wonder, does he feel something too? But the truth was, he never acted on it. No matter how many times I tried to subtly open the door, letting my touches linger, dropping hints in our conversations, finding excuses to be close, he never stepped through. The closest I ever got to a confession was when he mentioned waiting for the right person. And I responded, sometimes I feel like I already have. His answer? A casual, nah, I don't think so. It should have been my wake-up call. It should have been the moment I let go. But when you love someone that deeply, logic doesn't matter. My heart clung to the idea of him, to the possibility that maybe, just maybe, there was something there. And so, I stayed. I stayed in the pain, in the longing, in the constant back and forth of maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. I didn't know how to escape it, and I was starting to lose myself in the process. Moth 3. Mixed signals and confusion. If he didn't like me, then what were those looks? I wasn't imagining it. Our friends had noticed too. Whenever we were out together, no matter the setting, I'd glance over at him and find him already looking at me. And he wouldn't just look away. He'd hold my gaze. his lips curling into the kind of soft, knowing smile that made my stomach flip. It felt intimate, charged, like there was something unspoken hanging between us. But then, nothing. No follow-up, no shift in our relationship. Just nothing. It messed with my head. One night, we were at a bar, sitting close, laughing in that way that makes the rest of the world disappear. He took my hand, pulled me aside, and my heart pounded as I thought, finally. But then he asked me if one of my friends was single, because he thought she was cute. The whiplash was dizzying. Another time, after a long and intense shared look, I softly asked him what he was thinking about, my voice full of hope. His answer? An anthropological theory about blinking. I was trying everything. Subtle touches, suggestive conversations, lingering closeness. But he never reciprocated. When I casually suggested that deep friendship could turn into love, he disagreed, saying there had to be sexual attraction from the start. I wanted to scream. Then, what the hell is this tension between us? It felt like emotional whiplash. One moment, he seemed like he saw me, really saw me. The next, he was completely oblivious, as if the connection I felt so strongly was just my own imagination. I started questioning everything. Was I delusional? Was I overanalyzing? Maybe I was. Maybe I had just built up this whole story in my head, seeing signs where there were none. But if that was true, then why did it feel so real? I couldn't tell if he was unknowingly keeping me on the hook, or if he was just completely, painfully oblivious. Either way, I was trapped, torn between holding on to hope and forcing myself to move on. Chapter 4. Life takes a turn, crisis and separation. As much as my feelings for him consumed me, life had a way of pulling me in a different direction. One I never expected. About a month and a half after my original post, still stuck in the same cycle of unspoken feelings and unanswered questions, I took on a leadership role in organizing a major event at my university. At first, I thought it would be a good distraction, something to shift my focus away from him. But the reality was far more overwhelming than I could have imagined. My supervisor was cruel and unrelenting. The workload was suffocating, and on top of it all, I was juggling my thesis, personal stress, and the never-ending ache of my unrequited love. I started unraveling. The stress led me to self-destructive coping mechanisms. Drinking too much, using anything I could to numb myself, barely sleeping, barely functioning. The burnout hit me like a freight train. My mind spiraled into paranoia, convinced that people were watching me, listening to me. The walls closed in. My world, once so full of possibility, even if painful, became a haze of exhaustion, fear, and isolation. By September, I had completely shut down. I packed up my life and moved back in with my dad, no longer able to pretend that I was okay. I stopped going to school. I stopped talking to my friends. I stopped talking to him. At first, he reached out. A few calls, a couple of messages. I ignored them, not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't. The weight of everything was too much. By the time I resurfaced months later, he had stopped reaching out entirely. And just like that, he was gone. Not in a dramatic, explosive way, not with a painful confrontation or a heartbreaking goodbye, just silence. A slow, inevitable fading. I lost him, not because of rejection, not because of a fight, but because I simply disappeared. I ghosted my best friend. And when I finally looked up from the wreckage of my life, he wasn't there anymore. At the time, I barely had the energy to process it. I was too busy clawing my way back to sanity, to stability, to sobriety. But even as I rebuilt myself, a part of me knew I had let go of the thing I thought I wanted most. High five! Realization and moving on. The road to recovery was long, painful, and messy. In the beginning, I was too consumed by my own struggles to even think about him. My life had crumbled, and rebuilding it took everything I had. Therapy, rehab, long stretches of silence, and moments where I wondered if I'd ever feel normal again. But as time passed and the fog in my mind began to clear, so did my perspective. At some point in early 2020, I realized something shocking. I wasn't in love with him anymore. For so long, I had convinced myself that he was the one, that my feelings were inevitable, permanent, all-consuming. But the truth? Distance changed everything. Without him in my daily life, without the constant longing, the endless overanalyzing, the cycle of hope and heartbreak, those feelings started to fade. And once they were gone, I could see the situation for what it really was. I wasn't in love with him. I was in love with the idea of him. Looking back, it was painfully obvious. He had never led me on. If anything, he had been subtly, and sometimes not so subtly, turning me down the entire time. I had just been so desperate for a sign, for a reason to hold on, that I twisted every lingering glance and every long conversation into proof of something that wasn't there. And, if I'm being honest, part of me liked the security of unrequited love. As much as it hurt, there was a kind of twisted comfort in pining for someone who would never love me back. It meant I never had to take the risk of real love, never had to open myself up to someone who might actually want me. But once I let go, once I truly let go, I felt something I hadn't in years. Relief. A year or so later, with my life finally back on track, I met someone new. Someone who made me laugh just as much, who shared my interests, who wanted to hold my hand and sit too close and give me those long, lingering looks that actually meant something. Someone who made it effortless. And this time, I didn't have to wonder if he liked me back. We've been together for almost 3 years now, and I can say with absolute certainty that this quiet, steady, reciprocated love is what I was looking for all along. Not the emotional roller coaster, not the obsession, not the constant questioning, just love. Simple, mutual, and real. Now, as I sit in the comfort of the life I built, sober, stable, happy, I can look back on that chapter of my life with a sense of peace. I don't hate myself for what I felt. I don't blame him for not feeling the same. It was what it was. A painful, overwhelming, but ultimately temporary part of my story. And I wouldn't go back for anything. Hash 6. Life now and reflection. Life now feels like a quiet kind of happiness. The kind that doesn't come with grand gestures or heart-wrenching emotions, but with small moments of peace, stability, and genuine connection. I no longer wake up with a weight on my chest, wondering if today will be the day he finally sees me the way I saw him. I no longer obsess over every text message, every laugh, every accidental touch, searching for proof of something that was never there. Instead, I wake up next to someone who chooses me every single day. Someone who reaches for my hand instinctively, who doesn't hesitate when introducing me as his person. Someone who loves me in the way I used to dream about, but in a way that is even better, because it's real. Looking back, I see now how much I romanticized unrequited love. I thought the pain meant depth. I thought my suffering made it special. But the truth? Love shouldn't feel like you're constantly proving yourself. It shouldn't be a battle between hope and disappointment. It shouldn't leave you questioning your own worth. I learned the hard way that just because you love someone doesn't mean they're meant to be in your life the way you want them to be. And that's okay. Some people come into our lives to teach us, to shape us, to push us towards something better, even if that lesson is painful. If I could go back and talk to my younger self, I wouldn't tell her to stop loving him. I wouldn't tell her to get over it or to move on faster. Instead, I would tell her that love, real love, isn't supposed to hurt this much. I'd tell her that one day she'll look back on all of this and realize that she deserved so much more than almost. Now, when I think about him, it's with gratitude rather than longing. He was my best friend. He was an important part of my life. And even though it hurt to lose him the way I did, I wouldn't trade those years for anything, because they led me here. To a love that is easy, to a life that is full, to a version of myself that is stronger, wiser, and finally at peace. And that is more than enough. Number 7. Conclusion. Looking back, I realized that unrequited love was never truly about him. It was about me, about my own longing to be wanted, my deep-seated fears of rejection, and my desperate hope that if I just held on long enough, love would eventually be returned. But love doesn't work that way. Love isn't something you earn by waiting or suffering. It's something that happens naturally, effortlessly, when two people feel the same way about each other. It took years, a painful separation, and a lot of healing for me to understand that. But now, I see things clearly. I wasn't meant to be with him, and that's okay. He was never the one. He was just a chapter, an important one, but not the whole story. And my story didn't end with heartbreak. It continued. It led me to love that is mutual, fulfilling, and real. It led me to a life where I am happy, not because I finally won someone over, but because I let go of what wasn't meant for me. So, to anyone stuck in that endless cycle of pining and pain, wondering what if, and holding on to hope that may never be returned, I see you. I understand. And I promise you this. One day, you'll wake up and realize that the love you were waiting for was never supposed to come from them. It was always supposed to find you somewhere else. With someone who doesn't make you question. With someone who makes loving easy. And when that happens, you'll wonder why you ever settled for almost in the first place.